Hello and welcome. I'm Nathan, and by now you should know this vehicle here, my 2007 Audi A4 Avant, which I bought over a year and a half ago and basically restored it from the graveyard to what it is today. But in doing that, I sank quite a small fortune into getting it where it is. And in my hand here, I have all the receipts from day one. And at the end of this video, I'm going to see if it was all worth it. Rather than going through each and every individual invoice, because we don't have that kind of time, I decided to break it down into a nice summary here. And we're starting off with the engine. For those of you who've been watching this video series from day one, know when I spent $1,000 on this whole vehicle, I didn't realize right off the bat I'd have to invest quite a fortune into replacing the engine because the old one had timing chain issues which had caused it to bend valves. So right off the bat, that was a grand total for a new used engine with 134,000 kilometers now is $3,644. Ouch. Now granted, this vehicle currently has 210,000 kilometers on it. When I bought it, it had 202. So that's not all bad, I guess. I mean, used engines go for at least around 5K, depending on the vehicle. But yeah, it was still a small fortune, which I was very hesitant on the time on and whether I wanted to do it. But nonetheless, though, with this new used engine, I decided to do a bunch of preventative maintenance items as well. That includes a new rear main seal, because why not? Water pump pulley, fuel injectors, seals, O-rings, an accessory belt, valve cover gaskets, which I actually replaced on the old engine when I just swapped them over, the old valve covers, to this engine. So that was kind of a thing. Also spark plugs, timing chain tensioners, because the timing chain tensioners on either side, the upper ones that is, I decided to replace that because that's often what fails. The plastic just gets brittle. So decided to replace those as well. The motor mounts, because when I took out the old engine, those were just basically disintegrated in my hands. And then flex plate bolts and screws, which was kind of a small fortune actually. I had to get through those through Audi. Coolant flush plus coolant, vacuum pump kit, and an air filter, and then of course carbon cleaning using walnut shells, which didn't really cost me a whole lot. I think I had maybe spent $50 on a bag of walnut shells. So that's all the basic maintenance items, but of course there were some extra things that I added into this engine bay, that being a polyurethane snub mount for the front end here, because the factory one is just a foam one, which of course this one here was pretty much gone. So definitely an upgrade for sure. And then not to mention though, I did add a rain tray, which typically came in the higher end vehicles. This one I found never really had it, the 3.2s, but I decided to buy that. And this of course was from the dealership, and also the tray itself for the battery cover came from eBay. And also the RS4 cover here, I've never had that in my old Audi, so I thought it'd be kind of cool to have it here. That was a small expense as well. A lot of these parts, although genuine, most of them, some of them I had to get through other sources like eBay or even used, but most of these ones here were pretty much brand new. But that was it for the engine bay. So there are still a few items sort of relating to the engine, but sort of aren't part of the engine in a sense. And that is of course the exhaust. And the exhaust, I had to replace the flex pipes, so those sort of honeycomb looking things. So either side of the engine there, I replaced both of them because it's such a pain to get to. And I figured, while I had the engine out, just do it now. So that was quite, inexpensive. And also the exhaust clamps, sort of midway through the exhaust system, the original ones looked like they were starting to fall apart. So I decided to replace those as well. Now onto the drivetrain, I didn't really have too many problems with that. I did more just preventative maintenance on those items, and that includes the input shaft on the transmission, and then the transmission filter, transmission pan gasket, because you might as well. And then also, I managed to score some ZF fluid. That's the manufacturer's fluid, basically, for the transmission. So I got a pretty good deal on that. But not to mention that I had to replace the rear diff, and if you watch that video, you'll see that I had to replace that, and, well, it wasn't that hard of a job. But the rear diff, I got pretty lucky on only spending about $224 on that one. Since I'm down here, I might as well talk about the other items, of course. That is the brake pads and rotors. So I bought this vehicle, it had sat about 6 months previously, so the rotors were pretty much shot. So I decided to get new brake pads and rotors all around. And although I could have just gone with regular rotors and not like these nice drilled and slotted rotors, I decided, you know what, this vehicle is kind of sporty, although it does weigh a ton. So I decided to upgrade those to the drilled and slotted rotors, which were actually pretty expensive, to be honest. I'll say that now. Those were at $559.42 for the whole set, that's front and rear. Now onto my least favorite item when working on any car, and which was not that expensive, but more just a pain in the butt to do, and that of course is the suspension. Now, fortunately I just had to do the front suspension on this vehicle, and in that last video that you saw, I did the upper and lower control arms, and also the outer tie rod ends. And not to mention, when taking out the pinch bolt on the left-hand side, I ended up breaking up the housing, so I had to buy a whole new knuckle housing, which was just perfect. Now, before I get into the last category of upgrades, I figured I'd go into the miscellaneous expenses, which we often don't think about. And that, of course, is replacement of the outer taillights here on either side, because what happens is they get moisture in them over time and they short things out. So I had to replace both of them at some point on either side. And then, of course, I had to replace this inner tail light here because that was cracked when I bought it. And not to mention I had to paint this vehicle, which didn't really cost a whole lot. It only cost about $150 for all the paint supplies. Fortunately, I had a lot of those supplies from previous jobs, so that wasn't too bad, and it turned out okay. And I also replaced the battery right off the get-go, because when I bought this vehicle, you literally had to just have a jumper on it the whole time to get it going. So replaced the battery, which was, like any other battery, expensive. And then also a fuel filter, and then of course trim pieces. Trim pieces is another thing that I don't really think to add up the costs on, but it does add up over time. Of course, having replaced things like the shifter bezel, because that brushed aluminum was so scratched up it drove me crazy. And then not to mention a bunch of under trays for the vehicle, so the one that goes under the engine and transmission. And then of course the one on the right hand side that runs along the vehicle was all damaged, so I decided to replace that as well, which by the way, I got that part from Italy, so cool. And then other things, like I had to replace like the thing on the trunk here for the hatch, the thing that actually holds up the little cover in the back end. Shout out to Doug, who, I don't know if you watched his videos, but yeah, he actually had that 3D printed for me, so thank you for that. Not to mention other little trim pieces I had replaced over time, like the climate control buttons, because those were all kind of worn down. The last category I'm gonna get into before I add up the total cost, of course, is upgrades. Now, the stuff that I've already covered in the engine bay, of course, like the rain tray and the RS4 cover and the snub mount have already been included in this list. But the other things like the S-Line puddle lights, which I bought, which I thought was pretty cool. And then the LED interior kit for everything. And then, of course, originally I bought these EM tuning LED DRLs, which unfortunately gave up the ghost, which is kind of sad. And then the yellow LED fog lights, which are pretty cool. And then I got the fog light decoders. And of course, LED license plate bulb adapter kit, because this vehicle is very picky about LEDs and doesn't like them in most spots. All right, so for the total cost, and thank goodness I'm sitting down for this part, because I would probably faint having looked at the numbers now again. With everything all added up here, that includes the $1,000 purchase price and the $600 registration fee of the vehicle, and all the fixes and upgrades. It's $11,152.26. Having looked back at the numbers now on this, I think to myself, was it worth it? Was it worth going through all the pain and suffering financially? Not just that end of it, but all the work and time that I put into this vehicle to set it right. And you know what? I think so. I think despite the fact that at times, you know, when I wanted to give up and that people would say you're crazy and that you should just sell it and buy a new car, or why don't you just get rid of it? Why are you doing this? You know, it actually kind of gave me more fuel to want to do it. You know, every time I would give myself a bit of doubt, and others around me who would say, just get rid of it. Why are you sinking more money into it? Why not? You know, it's something that I will remember to the very day I die. Well, hopefully. That, you know, I worked on this vehicle. I basically built my skills even further. You know, I've never taken out an engine before to the vehicle. That was the first time doing that. You know, having to work on this vehicle, although it's actually not that complicated in many ways as some people make it out to be, it was just a good experience nonetheless, having worked and basically knowing this vehicle inside and out now. But nonetheless, though, I think that if you're going to do this at home, if you're thinking, oh, should I buy that, you know, that cheap car marketplace or whatever, you know, why not? Why not take a gamble? You know, you don't have to get it all done in a day. This has been about a year and a half, and it's still not 100%. But nonetheless, though, I think that, you know, taking that step, that leap of faith, and just trying something out is no harm, no foul. Even if you don't succeed, or if you don't make it to where you want it to be, I think that's totally fine. And I think, you know, would I do it again? Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe not right away, because Having looked at the numbers again, I think that there's definitely going to be no more money left in my budget. And to those of you who are watching, my family especially, I'm sorry, but Christmas is going to be a little bit tight this year. And on that note, I just want to say thank you very much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and also consider subscribing so you don't miss future videos like this, and also car projects and reviews on my channel. And until next time, take care. Bye now.